I love movie franchises. In fact, I've made a career out of ranking the movies in franchises. But today we're not talking about the movies themselves. We're looking at the franchises. I've got 22 of the biggest movie franchises, and we're gonna throw them into a tier list. So let's talk about it. If you want to join in on the fun, I've got a link down below in the description where you can create your own tier ranking. Screenshot it, share it over on Twitter or Instagram stories, tag me, and I will share some of your rankings. With that said, let's get started. First up, the Spider-Man franchises. This is the full deal. Holland, Maguire, Garfield, Spider-Verse, all of it. I'm gonna kick things off on a high note. I'm gonna throw this one way up there in S tier. Reason for that is that all of these are beloved versions of the character. Even like the Andrew Garfield films, which aren't the best received as individual films, they didn't hurt the franchise as a whole. When Andrew Garfield showed up in No Way Home, people went bananas. They started demanding we get a third film from him. They want a fourth Raimi film. They want a fourth Holland film. We can't wait until we get another Spider-Verse. On every single front, people are excited for more Spider-Man films. So even when it has a bad movie, it's still bulletproof. It remains unscathed. People love Spider-Man. People love every one of our Spider-Men that we've gotten. So for me, this one goes S tier. Next up, the Star Trek franchise. Now, I am a Star Trek fan for life. I've even got a picture of myself with one William Shatner. It has meant so much to me. Back in the 90s, I went to Star Trek conventions, not Comic Cons. Where do I put the movie franchise? I'm gonna go in the B tier. There are some absolute classic films in here, and all along the way in every era, there's been good ones, but in every single era, there has also been bad ones. At no point in time has it just consistently had a great run. So as much as I love these movies, it's always kind of been hit or miss. So much excitement whenever there's a new one. There's always hope it's going to be another great one. But then you get Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. You get Insurrection. You get Nemesis. Or in the J.J. Abrams one, they're fun roller coaster rides, but they're not particularly true Star Trek films. So this, as much as Star Trek means to me, it goes in the B tier. Then we got the Disney live action remakes or reimaginings. This is a different definition of a franchise, but it is a very clear category of films where Disney is consistently cranking out new live action or fake live action versions of their past animated films. So it kind of fits in here. And if you make them a franchise, they've made bukus of money, but this one's going in the D tier. This thing is a train wreck. It feels like a blatant cash grab. Some of them I do enjoy. I enjoy some of them quite a bit more than the general consensus on them. But as a whole, it feels so creatively bankrupt. So many of them just feel utterly soulless, where they recruit these iconic, legendary directors of the past to make generic corporate products, where you turn Robert Zemeckis into basically a McDonald's manager, or Tim Burton into a Chili's manager, just turning a former classic into a cheap cash grab. So for me, as a franchise, at a category, they've turned this into an absolute D tier. Indiana Jones. Now, this is a tricky one, and there's several of them that kind of fall into this tricky category for me, because there was a run of perfection, of best of the genre, legendary stuff, and then they kept on going. And there's several that fall into this category. That's what I'm going to call my A tier up here. Legends of the past. That's what they are, and that's where Indiana Jones is going. It started off with a perfect trilogy, and then two very broken things. You can't take away the fact that Indiana Jones, the quintessential adventurer, the perfect adventure trilogy, that will always be the case. He is the standard by which you evaluate everything, so he has to be way up there. That will always be true. but it is also true that you can't have him as S tier when you've got Dial of Destiny and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. The Conjuring universe, another one that's a little bit tricky for me because if I was just evaluating the mainline Conjuring films, the placement would be very different from the Conjuring universe. I think the mainline actual Conjuring films are fantastic horror films of the last decade. In particular, the two directed by James Wan. But hey, I don't have any significant issues with the third one either. And then you have all the spin-offs, where a couple of them are pretty good, but overall, they just dramatically pull this franchise down. I got to put this one in the C category. It is wildly inconsistent. The Nun franchise as a whole does not interest me. At least one of the Annabelle films, really bad. Curse of La Llorona, generally speaking, utterly forgettable. And then a couple that are more in the middle. But you have a franchise that is just so utterly dragged down because instead of just doing these really solid Conjuring films, they decided to spin it out. And there's just way more mediocre and bad than there is the classic stuff. Then we got a very relevant one, the Fox X-Men universe, one of the franchises that really launched the modern era of comic book movies and essentially was bookended with Deadpool and Wolverine this past week. For me, I'm going to put this one in the B category. It's another one of these franchises that has always had great movies and it's always had mediocre and bad movies. Every single one of its runs, every single one of its franchises has someone that's distinctly the weakest. Maybe Deadpool is kind of mostly free from that, but X-Men The Last Stand, significantly worse than the first two. X-Men Origins Wolverine, significantly worse than the other ones. Apocalypse, Dark Phoenix, much worse than Days of Future Past and First Class. You got New Mutants in there. And so as much as they have Days of Future Past, X2, Logan, you'll always have something counterbalancing it. So got to put it right there in the middle. Likewise, it never had just kind of that cohesiveness of franchise that you had with something, well, like some of the other ones we will have on this list. It's always kind of been standalone movies kind of being pulled together with a very weak continuity. Then we have Planet of the Apes. Generally speaking, I'm referring to the modern run of films, but it does have a legacy going back further than that. That was one of my favorite trilogies of the past decade. Caesar was my favorite character of the last decade. Every time I rewatch those movies, I struggle to rank that trilogy of films because for different reasons, I think each of them does something that's fantastic. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes in particular just feels like such an outlier of a blockbuster where it has Shakespearean themes and character arcs and intrigue between the way the story is constructed, and it has an ape riding a horse, dual wielding machine guns, battling a tank, which is awesome. And then they put the new one out. I thought it was really good, a great continuation that doesn't try to compete with the last three films, but complements it, plays out legacy. And then, of course, it is tied to this legendary franchise going back now over 50 years. I'm throwing this one in the S tier. It just has so much significance. It has stood the test of time. In a lot of ways, it's one of the original multimedia franchises that we've ever gotten, and it's still going strong, and in its current run, has not skipped a beat and delivered some of my favorite of modern times. Moving right along, Transformers. Just cut right to the chase on this one. We're going C tier. These movies are all over the place. Now, the first Transformers movie, solid Michael Bay blockbuster, big breakout performance for Shia LaBeouf, Megan Fox, a bunch of iconic stuff in there. And then they just kept making Michael Bay films, and they got more and more tedious, more and more ludicrous, more and more bloated, over the top, and just kind of difficult to sit through despite them being gigantic robots battling each other while blowing up buildings. And then Bumblebee is great. And then Rise of the Beasts is like right there in the middle of like, okay, it wasn't tedious like some of the other ones, but it also wasn't as interesting and energetic as some of those ones as well. So a franchise that I don't think it's ever been very good as a franchise. Individual films have been great. and they're followed up by like a disaster of a film. So not a great franchise. Real quick, today's video is brought to you by my supporters over on Patreon. I asked them for their recommendations for what videos I should do. The one that got the most votes was this one that you are watching right now that was submitted by Disney Nerd, who is actually a deputized moderator for my live streams that I do and for my channel. If you join at any level, $2 per month, $21 per year, you get all the exclusive videos. That includes 2 different live streams every week, a Q&A, as well as a box office show. $5 per month, you get your name on my end card, and at the top tier you get a one-on-one video chat with me each month. If you like my channel, want more content, want to join some live streams and get your questions answered, and a lot of those are clipped out onto my second channel, consider joining over on Patreon, supporting the channel, getting more content. With that said, let's get back to it. James Bond, right alongside Planet of the Apes, another one of these original movie franchises, and one of the ones that is the oldest, that it's 60 years old now. So right there with Godzilla, these are the OG movie franchises. In the case of James Bond, this is one that is absolutely iconic, so influential, and also extraordinarily uneven, where there's entire actors that played the part for over 10 years that I'm like, that just wasn't very good. And other ones I love, and ones that I love, and they made a movie I love, followed by a movie I do not love. So for me, James Bond goes into the B category. Absolutely legendary, but always inconsistent. Then we got another big gun. I'm looking at Star Wars. One of the absolute most difficult ones for me to place because Star Wars means so much to me. And all throughout the decades, there have been Star Wars things that I have loved. Of course, in many ways, it defined my childhood. It is now a big part of my son's childhood. Just a couple weeks back, I took my son to go see the OG Star Wars trilogy. And the month before that, we went to go see the prequels. Loved watching Mandalorian together. And at the same time, the prequels brought a ton of disappointment. The Last Jedi broke my heart. Rise of Skywalker, especially as time sat, I was like, oh dear, what has Star Wars turned into? And then so many of these TV shows just feel like, yikes, how are you making Star Wars, something I love so much, so uninteresting? But you can't take away the fact that Star Wars defined so much of me. Got to put it in that A category. Legend of the past. It did things that very few franchises have ever been able to do. But along with that, it kept going, turned into a villain, pulled a Harvey Dent, and thus can't be in the S category. But I also can't go any lower. It means too much to me. Here's an interesting one, Avatar. Now, there's only 2 movies here, so it's the smallest franchise on this list, but I did include it because they are planning on making 3 more of them, and the 2 that have been released, just by their box office alone, have made them one of the highest grossing movie franchises of all time with just 2 movies. Now, the Avatar films I find to be truly immersive, interesting, theatrical experiences, but a totally forgettable franchise, so it goes in the C tier. It's not an utter disaster, but thus far as a franchise, I don't really care. Like, you're not connected to any of the specific characters. The first movie didn't end and leave a bunch of plots dangling that made it real obvious where they're going with it. So it feels like we're fabricating a franchise simply because the first one made so much money. It has no cultural impact the way that the other franchises that are big and gigantic have. You don't have a bunch of kids playing with Avatar toys. You don't have people dressing up as Avatar characters at Comic Cons. And so it's just like this strange franchise that on the one hand is very profitable and on the other hand has a very minimal footprint. So, and I'm mad at it because it stole James Cameron from me. Then we got The Hunger Games. Cut right to the chase on this one. I'll put it in the B category. Solid franchise. No gigantic missteps, but for me also never really did anything that I absolutely loved. So rewatching them this last year when the new one came out, like I probably enjoyed it the most I've ever enjoyed them. I was like, this is a solid franchise. In particular, watching it with Chloe, my older daughter, and kind of her getting involved in that world. I thought the prequel was a solid prequel, kind of filling out the world, but it doesn't do anything to the way that some of the other franchises that are higher up. Just I absolutely love them. So this is one that no major missteps, but also nothing fantastic either. Then we got Despicable Me, and in this case, it is going in the D category. D for Despicable. I know a bunch of you are going to be mad at me for this, because you were already mad at me over my review for Despicable Me 4 and Defending Minions and all sorts of other films. This is a franchise that it started off strong, started off good, and I just don't think they've ever had anywhere much else to go with it. The original premise about following a supervillain gets lost by the end of the first movie, or it's resolved by the end of the first movie, and then they went on to make, 5 more films or whatever. Or 6 more. What are we on now? Yeah, 5 more films. And because of that, it just feels like we're stretching this thing out because they keep selling tickets, but the plot is plot is completely lost. It's just about cheap gimmicks for the TikTok generation. Some of these movies are really, really bad. And even the defenses people make of these movies is like, who cares about the plot? It's just about the gags. I like the minions. I like the villain. That's all I care about. If that's your defense, you're admitting it's not very good. That's why it's in the D tier. Let's counterbalance this thing. Mission Impossible, and I'm throwing this one in the S tier. This is the most reliable action franchise of the last 30 years. And in some ways, it feels like it keeps getting better and better and better. The stunts are crazier. The older Tom Cruise gets and he realizes, I'm going to die anyway, the more he becomes a daredevil and like, yeah, might as well perhaps die making this movie. And they're wilder, they're crazier, they're more fun, the world is more involved, you're more invested in the characters. And so this is a franchise, when they put a new one out, you can trust it's gonna be an enjoyable, solid film. When you're that dependable, S tier. And if your worst movie is a misguided but interesting John Woo, like romance action movie thing, if that's your worst step, doing something a little bit interesting, hey, I'm fine with it. Then we got the DCEU. I know a lot of people think this thing's an utter disaster. As a full continuity, it is messy as can be. I like it more than most people. I'm putting it in the B tier. When I went back and did my last ranking of these movies, there were way more movies that I liked than I didn't like. On that level, I was tempted to even, I kind of want to put it higher because there's so many things in here that I do enjoy more than most people. I like that there is more individuality in the films. The director has more of a stamp on them. At the same time, obviously, it's a very broken continuity that was horribly mismanaged, that has some disastrous films in it. So at the same time, as much as I want to go higher, I can't do that. But man, I think people so often are way too hard on way too many of these movies for all the wrong reasons. And on their own merits, they have more value than people give them credit for. Then we got Harry Potter and the Wizarding World. I've openly stated I've never been like a big Harry Potter fan. I've never been obsessed with the books. Like everyone else in my house is obsessed with Harry Potter, all of that fun stuff. And then, the Fantastic Beasts movies were of dwindling returns as they went along. At the end of the day, I got to throw this one in the A category, though. That it is absolute legend status, and Fantastic Beasts pulls it down from being top tier or whatever, because they are absolutely not that. But as a non-Harry Potter fan, I've been to Harry Potter World 4 times, excitedly. It's a fun world that was built out. As something that I'm not into, I don't mind rewatching the films. I don't mind that my family's into it. Just not the one that I've become obsessed with, but it's really well done. It's classic storytelling. It's an environment you like to go to, play around with. And whether that's watching the movies or going to Universal and like, oh, I get to go to Harry Potter World. It's that sort of immersive world that you've done something special. And as much as even like the Fantastic Beasts films have hurt the legacy, they haven't really done anything to harm that original set of films. Jurassic Park. Now, the original film is an absolute S-tier blockbuster, absolute classic that holds up to this day. And nothing else in this franchise has ever even come even remotely close to it. The one that I think is second best is Jurassic World, that I call a Taco Bell movie. It's cinematic fast food. Even the way that I enjoy it is essentially acknowledging that it's a cheapy version of something great, but it's very consumable, enjoyable because of the ingredients. If you cook with butter and sugar, it's probably going to taste good. That doesn't mean it's good for you. This is a C-tier franchise. I always want it to be better than it actually is. It is one phenomenal film and a bunch of significantly lesser films. Because I'm far more excited about them, the ones that are in the D category, like I don't care when they announce a new Despicable Me movie. I do get excited about a new Jurassic Park film, but the track record can't allow me it to go any higher than C tier. It's just not a very good franchise. Then we've got the John Wick franchise, and of the last decade, this is the S-tier action franchise. Now, it's kind of interesting when the way you do some of these rankings. Star Wars means a lot more to me than John Wick does, but John Wick always delivers. Every one of those movies was like the best action movie of the year that it came out. They kept pushing forward on the blending of stunt work with VFX to show things we've never seen before. All of them were interesting. All of them were fun to spend time in that world. So this is an action franchise that, like John Wick, does not miss. Middle Earth, another tricky one here, where if you look at just the original trilogy, that is S tier. If you look at the Hobbit trilogy, not S tier at all. And so where do you put that? Well, I think because you got a 50-50 situation, I got to go right there in the middle and average it. It is pulled down too hard by the Hobbit trilogy, so I'm putting this one in the B tier. It hurts to do that because the Peter Jackson original Lord of the Rings trilogy is so good. Once again, I'm like with Harry Potter, I am not a massive Lord of the Rings fan the way that you guys are. The way that I love Star Wars, I don't love Lord of the Rings in the same way, but they're fantastic films. They're very good films. And so I want to honor that, but they dishonored themselves by putting out the Hobbit trilogy, which on a simple level, they took the smallest book and tried to pad it out into a trilogy. They literally turned a 5-page battle in a book, or like a 3-page battle in a book, into a 2.5-hour long movie. That's the definition of padding things out, stretching it out, just so you can put out one more gigantic blockbuster and try and mirror the success that you had with the original trilogy. That to me is kind of cynical and gross, so I have to knock it down. We're in the final stretch on here, and we've got the Sony Spider-Man-less universe. The Spumunk, as it was called, absolute D-tier franchise. I enjoy the Venom movies, so those ones are at least kind of fun, but as a concept for a franchise, this is so cynical. It's so gross. It's so obvious what Sony is doing. They have access to the Spider-Man characters. You can only put out so many Spider-Man movies every so many years. So let's turn every villain into its own franchise. There's no oversight to it. The quality is, in most cases, dreadful. If your best movies, the ones that are like, those are pretty good, are the Venom movies, your franchise is an utter disaster. So without question, this is a D-tier franchise. It's cynical. It's laughably bad when you watch Morbius, you watch Madam Web. It's not just like bad movies, it's incompetent movies, devoid of anything real of value. The entertainment factor with those films is laughing at how bad they are and the insanity that Sony would throw $100 million at these disasters. Next to last on here, we've got Fast and the Furious. To me, these are very fun, dumb movies. This is an absolute Taco Bell franchise. By its nature, it is cinematic fast food to me. I've been watching them since the very first one came out, seen all of them in the theater except Tokyo Drift. They're fun movies in the theater, but they're essentially big budget B movies. By definition, B movies aren't big budget, but that's what they are. Let's do schlock value. We're gonna drive cars in space. We're gonna drag a vault with sports cars. We're gonna blow up tanks. It's ridiculous. It's silly. They're fun. It's not aiming high, but they always deliver fun. This, to me, is a B franchise at its core. Finally, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Just this last weekend, it crossed $30 billion of gross revenue. No franchise has ever come even close to that. And it has done tremendous things. It is absolutely legendary in its ability to be a cinematic universe. It is the one everyone is copying or copied for the last now over a decade of having all these different franchises, pulling them together, team up movies, gigantic arcs, standalone stories. And if we were looking at it after Endgame, it would be S tier. But phases 4 and 5, I think you have to knock it back to the A tier. This is a classic example of legend of past. Not that it's awful now, there's still wins, but there's a lot of misses too. And so that legend status, I can't give it to you when your batting average is where it's currently at. There's a lack of focus. Maybe by the time we get to the end of phase 6, it'll go back up. It'll be strong enough by the end of it, but it feels a little bit rudderless, a little bit lost, a little bit like it's trying to course correct. So you had an S tier first 23 movies, phases 1 through 3. And we got knocked back by our most recent phases, so that's where we're at. So here's our final ranking of all of them. Be sure to create your own at that link down below in the description. Screenshot it, share it on Instagram, stories, Twitter, tag me. I will share some of your rankings across my social media. Check out some of my other videos right over here. Consider joining over on Patreon. The link for that is down below in the description. I do those 2 live streams. You can have your name on the end card like these ones right here, or at the highest tier, you can do that video chat with me. Thank you so much for watching. Keep talking movies and TV too much.